if you really think about it, 10 Cloverfield Lane took probably almost too many really big risks. Because, first off, it's a horror film with only three characters, a female lead, an ambiguous premise, and it's called Cloverfield. Like, right there off the bat, there's like, just off the top of my head, there's like five huge red flags that if I were talking about any other film would nearly almost turn me off immediately. Uh, but here, they took all those risks and they just paid off in spades. Like, I can't believe how clever and engaging and legitimately tense this film was, given all of the things that it had going against it. Mary Elizabeth Winstead just fucking killed it in this film. She really sold the Michelle character being as tough and as clever and as resourceful as she was. And I was sitting there as I was watching the film, like, even like early on into it, before some more elaborate things happen with Michelle's character and her character's actions, is that this character's a Ripley. You know, like, I couldn't help but draw all these parallels between her and Ellen Ripley, trying to survive in an enclosed space with an authoritarian sort of lean to it, with an ambiguous threat, and having to use just what's around her to try and fight and survive. And I was kind of blown away by this, because a lot of movies that you watch with a female protagonist, especially horror movies, they really undersell the abilities of the character. But here she's crafting weapons and setting traps and being duplicitous. I think Mary Elizabeth Winstead's performance really elevated this movie into the tier that it is. Not to say that the other performances weren't also fantastic. John Goodman especially, I was surprised to see him really convincingly play a weirdo. And at least from what I've seen of John Goodman's characters in other films, he mostly plays more straightforward characters. And seeing him play somebody with something to hide, or at least seem like he's hiding something, I like that a lot. And like, you could almost watch this film exclusively for his performance and focus really on that. But he is more or less a side character, supporting character. The side is too condescending. He's a supporting character, and it's Winstead who really makes this film work. And as far as I'm concerned, it was pretty much just a vehicle for her to be just fucking incredible throughout the whole thing. And it really helps that all the actors had this great script to work off of, because it's full of all sorts of clever little details that I loved. Like, at one point, Michelle is waiting to ambush Howard. She's made this, like, she's sharpened up an end of her crutch. She's going to stab him with it. And she's sitting there waiting. And she waits. She waits. And, you know, in a kind of a realistic sort of twist, you know, she gets fed up with it, of course, because, like, being ready, like, constantly, like, that isn't really super feasible. Especially if you're injured or whatever. And so instead she gets clever and she sets a trap. She sets a fire and puts it in the vent in her room and makes him have to come in there. So she gets impatient, you know, and that's just another piece of depth to that character. And that's the sort of thing that really helps sell the situation that they're in. I do want to talk about the use of Cloverfield in the title, because I know from what I've read that it was mostly like a marketing thing. Because it's just the state of the film industry now that you can't have something new come out without relating it to something else and have it do well, apparently. And J.J. Abrams' production studio was involved with the making of this film, because apparently he liked the script or something. And somebody on the production team had the idea of tying it into the Cloverfield film, and I think it works a little deeper than that. And while I didn't really enjoy the first Cloverfield film, I mean, I saw it when it came out, so I don't know if I feel differently about it now. But I remember having a real strong distaste for it. But I can't deny that it did cultivate a sense of wonder and curiosity about the larger world of the film. And that's something that I think works a hell of a lot better in 10 Cloverfield Lane, because your exposure to the outside world is through the Michelle character, and it's so limited, and she has to rely on information that may or may not be reliable, and using that to foment this feeling of grander things happening outside of the bunker works so much better here, because whereas in Cloverfield, it's New York City, and people are running around and it's this huge environment. But here, the environment is so small and so contained and so personal that the imagination or imagined idea of what could be going on is such a stronger juxtaposition, that it makes a much larger impact here, and is more in tune, I guess, with the spirit of the original film. I just think it's kind of interesting to see that thematic thread taken from Cloverfield and then used in 10 Cloverfield Lane to actually weave something interesting, and to actually deliver on a feeling of fascination about what's going on in the outside world. And it's kind of ironic that this big grandiose spectacle film in the original Cloverfield doesn't do it as well as this tiny indie film, essentially, about three people talking in a hole for an hour and a half, What I liked about the ending is that, yes, everything is as terrible as possible, but that final sequence, I think, while not necessarily important to the rest of the film, I felt like it was important to the audience to just put that bullet point in Michelle's character and saying that, yes, she is this fucking badass, she is a Ripley, and giving this sort of exhibition of her agency as a character was really satisfying, and I'm glad they did it. But if they would have ended the movie at the big moment, I think it would have been just as fucking good.